I'm in the Galilee. Behind me is the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel, but don't let this amazing view and the peaceful sounds to trick you, because war could break out at any moment right now. Things are very tense. Let me explain everything that you need to know, and let's start from the top. Today, the day of Israeli civilians living right there in the Upper Galilee and some parts in the Golan Heights was cut short when rocket sirens were heard throughout the region. At first we thought that the region was targeted by rockets from Syria or from Lebanon, but later on the IDF, the Israeli army, released a statement that a small hostile UAV has infiltrated Israeli territory, Israeli airspace from Lebanon, and it activated the Iron Dome defense system and Israeli F-16 fighter jets and helicopters. But unfortunately, the UAV came back to where it came from, back to Lebanon, and it was not shot down. This happens hours after the leader of Hezbollah announced that they started to manufacture their very own UAVs, as well as an arsenal of thousands of precision-guided missiles, all directed at one country, Israel. But before I continue, please subscribe to my channel to stay connected to all the latest and breaking news that are coming from Israel, but also the positive side of Israel. All the dots are connected together, because while the world is focused on the Ukraine crisis with Russia, the Iranian regime is taking advantage of that and continue to base itself militarily in Syria and using Hezbollah to base itself in Lebanon. Last night, the Russian defense minister arrived in Syria to meet with Assad. Hours after he arrived in Damascus, Israel, according to reports, struck an Iranian base using surface-to-surface missiles. And also last night, Israel shot down a Hezbollah surveillance drone that crossed into Israel from Lebanon. As you know, Syria is no longer Syria, and Lebanon is no longer Lebanon. There is a new equation in the region that's challenging the Israeli army. Syria has become a base for Russia and Iran. Assad is no longer deciding for the Syrian people, not that he ever did, but now he's a puppet in the hands of Russia and Iran. And the Iranian regime is also trying to base itself in Lebanon using Hezbollah as its proxy. Why? Just take a closer look at the map. The Iranian regime recently unveiled a new missile called Khaybar that can reach any part in Israel. Now, not only that, they want to base their troops on Israel's borders because at some point they plan on attacking Israel. So whenever you hear reports about strikes in Syria, it's most likely to be Israel fighting the Islamic regime in Iran, but not in Iran, in Syria. That's the so-called unseen Iranian activity on the borders of Israel. Of course, it is seen to the Israeli intelligence that are aware of that, but there is a real unseen threat that most of the countries turn a blind eye to, and that's the nuclear threat. With one hand, the Islamic regime in Iran is negotiating re-entering the nuclear deal with the Western countries, but with the other hand, they just built a new secret nuclear facility very deep, far under the ground, that is protected from airstrikes. And obviously it's not a secret that Israel has been training its military to strike the nuclear facilities in Iran because it poses an existential threat to us, the Israeli civilians. So this new secret facility, maybe more than one, is a real challenge and a real threat because they continue to advance their secret nuclear program under the radar. So yes, all the dots are connecting right now because Russia, China, and Iran are building a military coalition. You probably didn't even hear about this, but after Iran and China signed a 25-year deal that basically sold Iran to China in exchange for benefits for the Iranian regime, now reports within Iran say that China sent around 5,000 troops to Iran to stay there. Chinese soldiers in the Middle East. Everybody in Iran is talking about this, except for who? The West. If the West will continue to be headed by the Biden administration, we will continue to lose battle after battle. It was Afghanistan, maybe it's Ukraine. What's next, Taiwan? We need strong leaders, today more than ever. So keep your eyes open, because Ukraine might be a diversion for something bigger, and maybe not. But the fact that China, Russia, and Iran are building a military coalition is very worrying news to Israel and bad news to normality in our world. I am curious, however, to hear from you. What do you think about this whole situation, let me know in the comments. I'm sending peace to you from the Sea of Galilee.